Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A topic I really enjoy. Let's do it. What is the most unexplained mystery? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. The man from Torrid. To quickly summarize, this guy had a passport for a non-existent country called Torrid. He was picked up by authorities in Japan, I believe, using a fake passport from Torrid. When shown a globe, he pointed to where it's supposed to be, but it wasn't there. He became visibly freaked out, and authorities confiscated his belongings and put him in a guarded room overnight until they figured out if any crime was committed. His room was guarded by 2 armed guards, and his things were in evidence bags at the police station. When checked on the next morning, he had disappeared from his locked, guarded room. To make things even weirder, his belongings disappeared from the highly secure evidence room at the station. So fascinating. I personally think our reality could overlap others from time to time, and people and things can slip through until reality realizes it messed up and corrects itself. One of the more mysterious murder cases in the history of Israel is the murder of 13-year-old Tair Rada. In December 2006, 13-year-old Tair Rada reportedly decided to skip the last period of the school day. She stayed outside in the schoolyard with friends for a while before going back into high school building to get a drink of water. She was last seen by several students going up a staircase leading to a mid-floor of 10th grade classes. Later that afternoon, when she failed to return home, her mother contacted the police and a search throughout the town began. Later that evening around 7 p.m., she was found murdered in a locked stall in the girls' bathroom, her throat slit twice and multiple additional cuts to her face, torso, and hands. According to news reports from the evening of the murder, the police's initial estimate was that teens from the school were involved. It was abandoned soon after. On the night of the murder, police detained a homeless person as a suspect. 3 days later, police detained the school gardener as well. Both were released 2 days later due to the fact that they weren't at or near the school on that day, and their alibis were confirmed. On December 11th, police detained and interrogated Roman Zadorov. On December 19th, 2 weeks after the murder, police announced in a press conference during primetime television on the 8 p.m. evening news that Zadorov is held as the most likely suspect and that he had admitted and reenacted the murder. A day later, his attorney informed him that he had recanted his confession. The motive for the murder, as initially stated by the police, was insults hurled at Zadorov after he denied Tair's request for a cigarette. Both her family and friends, however, stated that not only did she not smoke, but she couldn't even stand the smell of cigarettes. They also stated that rude behavior and cursing were very uncharacteristic of her. That motive was dropped. Police later claimed that the motive was abuse Zadorov suffered by female classmates when he was 8 years old in Ukraine, which caused a rage fit after he suffered continuous pestering by the school's students during his work. But that could not be confirmed. No alternative motives for the murder were presented by police in the indictment. Zadorov was convicted in court and was sent to life in prison. In early 2016, a 4-part documentary TV series aired in Israel called Shadow of Truth, reviewing the Tair Rada murder, Roman Zadorov conviction affair. It caused a major media storm, raising many doubts regarding Zadorov's conviction and pointing at many flaws in his investigation and trial. The 4th episode revealed a never-heard-before testimony of a man, referred to in this series as A.H., who told the police in 2012 that his ex-girlfriend had confessed to him on the day of the murder and even showed him a knife and clothes soaked in blood. Following his testimony, his ex-girlfriend, referred to as AK, was then arrested by police and investigated under suspicion of murder. While she was under house arrest, She left her home and tried to kill someone, and she was subsequently sent to a psychiatric hospital without being further interrogated about her involvement in the Rada case. Along with his own lawyer and Zadarov's public defender, who are also interviewed in the episode, A.H. claims that the investigation had been whitewashed. To this day, Zadarov is still serving time for the murder and still pleading not guilty. A big part of the public in Israel believes he's innocent, and there's a lot of pressure to reopen the case. If you want to get more details on this story, recently Netflix bought the documentary TV series, and you can check it out over there. Astronomer here. In my field, the WOW signal is probably the most famous unexplained mystery. It was basically detected in 1977 by a telescope that was just pointed overhead and looked very similar to what SETI signal is expecting to look like. It was first noticed the next morning by an astronomer who wrote "wow" in the log margins and was never seen again despite extensive follow-up over the years. There have been various suggestions on what the WOW signal was, but no, it probably wasn't comets. Personally, based on my experience with man-made interference, RFI, in radio astronomy, I wrote a paper on distinguishing a real transient signal from that stuff. It was most likely RFI from a satellite or similar, but until we see another signal like it, we just don't know for sure, and that's very fun to think about. Many will disagree with my reasoning, but the Billy Mayer UFO hoax, it's pretty obvious it wasn't real, but to think about the lengths the man went to make his intricate narrative is interesting. Did his apparent motivations make any sense? How many people protected his secrets? Why did some parts of his story fool so many people and other parts so ridiculous? In many ways, it's an obvious story. A guy has an idea and takes it too far. The events themselves aren't unexplained, but he is a strange, mysterious, fascinating story by himself. I know it's been 6 hours, so it's unlikely anyone will see this, but I'd like to know what actually happened in Hamelin in 1284 that made a bunch of children vanish. Like, that's where the tale of the Pied Piper comes from. We know that something did actually happen because the history of Hamelin starts in 1384 with "It's been 100 years since our children were taken." What took them? Why? Why do we still use the expression, "It's time to pay the piper"? We don't know. Maybe it actually was an effing fairy with a flute. We have no proof that it wasn't. The Codex Gigas. Supposedly the Devil's Bible. It's been mysteriously saved multiple times from burning buildings. For example, it was chucked out of a burning building from the 4th floor or something. But the catch is that a single person can't carry it. It weighs several hundred pounds. And no one was in the building. Nobody knows where it's been originated. Also, it's reported that there's evidence in the handwriting and ink that the entire book was written with a very short period of time, like a week or something. But the book is huge and should have taken years to write. Really interesting stuff. I have a personal mystery that has plagued my roommate and me for several months. One morning, my roommate woke up and went to the bathroom. She found small, dirty paw prints in the bathtub, on the toilet seat, and in the sink. They looked like they belonged to a kitten. We were perplexed. We have no cats. We left no windows or doors open or unlocked the night before, and nothing was damaged in the morning. We're on the 2nd story, and there are no holes in our walls, floors, or ceilings. We have no fireplace or dog food. We spent a good hour before work that morning searching for a cat hiding out in our apartment to no avail. That was about 5 months ago, and it hasn't happened again since. But this is a mystery that'll bother me until I'm old and gray. Another fun dimension to this story is that we frequently joke about having spirits in the apartment. Neither of us are superstitious at all, but living in an old crappy apartment is more fun if you blame stupid shit on something supernatural. If a cabinet door pops open, we'll say, "Those dang spirits," and slam it shut. Now we're concerned and we've concluded that the spirits have a kitten. 4 years ago, a young girl named Cecile Penel went missing. Was at a music festival in Croatia with a few friends. One morning she got out of the van to go for a pee. She never came back. She was reported missing shortly after. The area was searched and they found her wallet and phone in an abandoned ruin not far away. No trace of her anywhere though. Just a few days ago, some bones were found not far from where she disappeared from. DNA tests show it's her. She apparently died from a blow to the head, but no one knows anymore, and the family is trying to get her remains back so they can ask for a real autopsy. The Croatian police were not helpful at all, and the French police didn't give a shit either. So no one knows what happened to her. There's also a mystery about a guy who left one day to get milk or something at the store and never returned. About 40 years later, a man appeared in front of a police officer in the middle of the street in New York City. He became terrified and ran into traffic, got hit, and died. His clothes were pristine from decades before. His money was old and he had a locket in his pocket. Anyways, years later, an investigator tracked down his daughter, who was elderly by then, but never forgot about her dad's disappearance, and finally got an answer. As weird as it sounds, her father seemingly randomly time traveled and died. There's full stories about it, but I'm lazy, and it worked. The 2003 theft and disappearance of a Boeing 727. Always been interesting to me because of how big of an airplane it is. Like, yeah, small GA planes have gone missing over the years and never found. But something as big as a 727 is just weird. The most reasonable explanation is that the plane probably crashed into the ocean, hence why it hasn't been found. But there have been massive resources put into the incident, and they've literally found no trace of it at all. Generally, if a plane that large were to crash in the ocean, they'd at least have some idea, but it's just as likely based on the evidence they've found, quite literally nothing, that it landed in a desert, as it did in the ocean. Also, while it's feasible to figure out how to fly one with just basic flying skills, looking at guides, videos, and knowing the basic limits of the airplane, starting up a plane like that, and successfully getting it into the air with one person, the other guy who stole the plane had zero flying experience, who, from what I've read, had only flown small single props. Makes it even more interesting. I mean, we talk about a missing plane here. How could you not think of MH370? I mean, where did that plane go? Where's any debris? We could use satellites to pinpoint me right now. The government can listen to us at any point in the world. And you mean to tell me, reasonably speaking, that many people with that many pinging Wi-Fi cell phones, even in airplane mode, no government in the world, the US government, NATO, Australia, seriously? We can't pinpoint where that plane went down or disappeared? We accept such ridiculousness because we're so consumed with our everyday life that we don't speak truth to power and we don't try to hold those in power accountable. This doesn't add up, but it just gets forced down the memory hole because there's the next tragedy coming up at 11. Orange Air. I was visiting a friend in Vancouver, Canada in the autumn of 1999. At around 9 p.m. we stepped outside and soon tried to figure out what big bright sign or light was illuminating everything orange. To our amazement, there were no lights of any kind. Then a neighbor came out and asked where the light was coming from. The haze, the fog, the air itself was absolutely glowing a greenish orange. Soon others appeared, dog walkers coming back bewildered. We decided to take a walk, and sure enough, it was everywhere. We saw another neighbor waving their arms in the air as if it were smoke. But it was just as if the atmosphere, the air itself, was simply electrified orange. About an hour later, it wasn't too noticeable anymore, but for what it's worth, the sky, as in looking up to the clouds, was the most astonishing and strange electric blue I've ever seen in my life. Anyways, yes, there were enough reports to a local planetarium that it was mentioned on local radio stations. The experts on hand suggested the only known way this could happen is if some sort of meteor or meteor shower had zoomed through the sky and some sort of glow phenomenon could happen. However, they emphasized that they had detected no such meteors at all. Nobody else heard or saw anything about meteors from locals either. To this day, I've never heard any kind of explanation. I've never even heard or seen a similar experience, and I don't know that if I've ever found even a good hypothesis online in going on 20 years of internet accumulation. The whole neighborhood was glowing orange. The air itself was bright glowing hue, as if a massive orange stage light was being shined from somewhere we couldn't see. The death of Edgar Allen Poe. Poe was found wandering the streets of Baltimore on October 3, 1849. He was brought to the hospital, where he died 4 days later on the 7th. He was never lucid enough to tell anyone what had happened to him. Even the cause of his death isn't known for sure. The last reliable sighting of Poe before October 3rd was on September 27th, when he left his home to go to New York. I recommend reading the Wikipedia article. It is truly interesting. Oh yeah, on Long Island, New York, we have the Gilgo Beach Killer, who has killed somewhere between 10 and 20 prostitutes over the past 20 years. They've chopped their bodies up into tiny pieces and dumped them in the dunes at the beach. They've identified some of the remains, but many of the other remain unknown. They also haven't found all the components of some of the bodies, so some of the Jane Does are just listed as human head and left foot. The FBI was involved, but it's very much remained a cold case with no leads. At one point, it was suspected that the local police chief was the killer, but those accusations largely remain unfounded. Circleville writer. Woman started getting anonymous letters asking her to confess to having an affair with the superintendent of schools in the area. Letters increased in frequency and became more threatening. After a while, they seemed to stop, then started again one day. Someone phoned her house, her husband picked up, and claimed to know who was writing the letters, and left the house with his gun. They found his car crashed. He was dead. His gun had fired 2 bullets. His blood alcohol limit was insane, even though everyone who knew him claims he was not a heavy drinker. Letters kept coming in, and the monuments on her bus route started popping up that threatened her. One day, she saw a sign saying, "Rest in peace," her daughter's name. She stopped the bus and tried to tear it off. Luckily, she did. However, because it was booby-trapped with a gun to fire at whoever tore it up, the gun's serial number was scratched off, but they did find out it belonged to her brother-in-law. He was sent to jail despite pleading his innocence, but the letters kept coming to her and even to him. He was eventually released and used the insane and the internet to put up all the details to get others to help solve it, I think. Up until 2001, they were still being sent to her, her family, and wider residents of Circleville. The writer even sent a message to Unsolved Mysteries, warning them about going after the local sheriff, who was accused of helping to cover up the person doing it or trying to lower reported crime rates to profit from funding.